The tie was navy blue with a thin silver stripe running diagonally across it, and it had been sitting in a department store box on the kitchen counter for 3 days before anyone touched it. Ryan had picked it out himself, which surprised her, because Ryan had spent the better part of 31 years refusing to care about what he wore. But he had walked into that store in downtown Andar, Cincinnati on a Tuesday afternoon and pointed at this specific tie without hesitation, and when the saleswoman asked if he was sure, he said yes. Absolutely. Like he had been sure about it his entire life. Margaret had wrapped it back in the tissue paper after he showed her. She placed it exactly where he had left it, and every morning when she came downstairs to make coffee, she looked at that box, and something in her chest did a thing she couldn't quite name. She had been practicing, you see. Not with that tie specifically, with everything. When Ryan was 4 years old and insisted on dressing himself for the first time, Margaret stood behind him in the hallway mirror and watched him wrestle with the buttons of his little plaid shirt, getting them wrong, skipping one, the whole thing going lopsided, and she kept her hands at her sides. She let him figure it out. She bit the inside of her cheek and she let him figure it out. When he finally looked up at the mirror and saw the crooked result and looked at her with those enormous brown eyes, asking silently if it was okay, she said it was perfect. Because it was. It absolutely was. When he was 7 and fell off his bicycle on the neighborhood slope and came home with a scraped knee bleeding through his jeans, she cleaned it without making a sound that would frighten him. She held his leg steady, and she worked carefully, and she told him stories the whole time. Ridiculous made-up stories about a dog who wanted to be an astronaut was because she had learned early that Ryan was the kind of child who needed distraction more than he needed sympathy. She read him the way she had always read him, like a book she had memorized but still loved opening. His father, Tom, left when Ryan was 9. Margaret did not say anything bad about Tom to Ryan. Not once, not ever. Not even in the years that came later when she probably would have been justified. She sat Ryan down at the kitchen table the night Tom left, and she told him that sometimes adults had problems that had nothing to do with their children, and that his father loved him, and that this house was still a home and always would be. Then she made grilled cheese sandwiches because that was what Ryan wanted for dinner, and they ate them together watching a baseball game, and she held herself together with everything she had until he fell asleep. And then she went to her room and sat on the floor and allowed herself exactly 45 minutes of falling completely apart before she put herself back together, because the morning was coming, and Ryan would need breakfast, and she was the only one there to make it. She worked 2 jobs for 3 years. She learned how to fix the leaking kitchen sink by watching videos on the computer her sister helped her buy. She went to every school play, every science fair, every parent-teacher conference where a teacher told her Ryan was bright but easily distracted, and she said thank you and asked what she could do at home to help. She coached his little league team for 1 season because no other parent volunteered, and Ryan wanted to play more than anything. She knew nothing about baseball. She learned. There was a period when Ryan was 15 where she nearly lost him. Not to tragedy, to silence. To that specific teenage disappearance where a boy who once told you everything starts telling you nothing, closes his door, lives his life entirely behind it, and you stand in the hallway, sometimes just listening for signs that he is still in there somewhere. She did not push. She left food outside his door. She knocked once every evening and said goodnight and waited for the muffled response that always came, however quietly. She trusted something she couldn't fully explain, that the boy she had raised was still in there, still intact, still hers in the most important way. She was right. By 17, he was back, sitting at the kitchen counter again doing homework while she cooked, filling the house with that easy, comfortable noise of a person who is simply glad to be near you. She watched him leave for college with a duffel bag that was not packed well and a look on his face that was trying very hard to seem confident. She stood on the sidewalk in front of the car and she hugged him for slightly longer than he was comfortable with, which made him laugh and squirm away. And then he got in the car with his roommate's family who were driving both boys to Columbus, and she stood on that sidewalk until the car turned the corner and disappeared completely. Then she went inside and made herself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table and felt the exact size and shape of his absence for the first time in 18 years. She filled the years after that with things: community garden, a ceramics class on Thursday evenings, long phone calls with Ryan that started awkwardly and grew easier, visits where he came home for holidays and ate everything she cooked, and slept too late and left dishes in the sink. And those dishes were the most beautiful sight in the world to her every single time. She drove to Columbus twice to help him move apartments. She met 3 different girlfriends over the years, all of them perfectly nice, none of them quite right, and she said nothing about that either. She had learned a long time ago that saying nothing was sometimes the deepest form of love. And then he called her on a Thursday evening in October, interrupting her ceramics class, which he knew she never missed. And she stepped outside to answer because something in the timing told her to. "Mom," he said. "I'm here," she said. "I asked Natalie to marry me." She pressed her hand flat against the brick wall of the community center and breathed. "She said yes?" Margaret asked, though she already knew. "She said yes," Ryan said, and his voice did something in that moment, cracked open slightly, like a door with light behind it, and she heard inside that crack the 4-year-old with the crooked buttons and the 7-year-old with the scraped knee and the 15-year-old behind the closed door and the 18-year-old trying so hard to look confident on a sidewalk, all of them layered inside this 31-year-old man who had somehow, incredibly, grown into someone capable of loving another person well enough that she said yes. "I'm so happy," Margaret said. "I'm so happy, Ryan." She meant it with every single part of herself. She met Natalie properly that Christmas. Natalie was warm and direct and laughed at her own jokes before she finished telling them, which Ryan found endlessly charming in a way that was obvious to everyone in the room. She was good for him. Margaret could see it the way she could always see things about Ryan, clearly, quickly, without needing to be told. After dinner, while Ryan was doing dishes, Natalie sat beside Margaret on the living room couch and said, quietly and sincerely, "I want you to know that I understand what you mean to him. I just want you to know that I know." Margaret looked at this young woman who was going to marry her son and felt something shift gently into place, inside her chest. "Thank you," she said. "That means more than you know." The wedding was planned for June. Cincinnati in June was always either perfect or sweltering, and this particular Saturday delivered something rare and precious. A clear sky, a mild breeze, temperatures that felt like the weather itself had dressed up for the occasion. The venue was a restored, old estate on the edge of the city with white, wooden chairs arranged on a lawn and flowers everywhere that Natalie had chosen herself and that were, Margaret had to admit, absolutely beautiful. She was in the groom's suite with Ryan an hour before the ceremony. His groomsmen had gone ahead to take photos on the grounds, and it was just the two of them in this quiet room with good light coming through tall windows. Ryan was in his suit, charcoal gray, perfectly fitted, and the navy tie with the silver stripe was around his neck. And it was not right. He had tried to knot it himself, and it was slightly too long, sitting wrong, the knot too loose at the collar. He was looking at himself in the mirror, with the particular expression of a man who is managing many things internally and focusing on the tie because the tie is the only thing he can actually control. Margaret walked up beside him. "Let me," she said. He turned to face her, and she reached up and loosened the knot, and pulled the tie free and started again. Her fingers moved without hesitation. She had practiced this, not just in her mind, though she had done that too. She had actually practiced this on a tie she bought at a thrift store, standing at her bathroom mirror on quiet Sunday mornings, tying and untying until she had it, until she knew the length, the fold, the weight of the knot, until her hands could do it the way they had learned to do everything for him, steadily, surely, without making him feel like he needed the help. The room was very quiet. Ryan was looking down at her hands, then at her face. She could feel him watching her. She kept her eyes on the tie. When it was done, she smoothed it flat against his chest and straightened it and then stepped back to look at him, her son, in a charcoal suit, with his father's jawline and her mother's eyes and something that was entirely and only his own, this particular quality of goodness that she could not take credit for and did not try to. Some things a person grows into themselves. He looked right. He looked exactly right. "Mom," he said. His voice was doing the thing again. The cracked door thing. "Don't," she said softly, smiling. Because she knew if he started, she would start. And neither of them had time for that before a wedding. He laughed instead, which was better. He pulled her into a hug, the long kind. Not the squirming away kind. And she put her arms around her son, and closed her eyes and held in one single moment every version of him she had ever loved. The 4-year-old, the 7-year-old, the 15-year-old, the 18-year-old. And this one, this beautiful, complete, finally arrived version standing here in a charcoal suit about to walk toward the rest of his life. "Thank you," he said into her hair. "For everything, all of it. I know what it cost you." She pulled back and looked at him and told him the absolute truth. "It didn't cost me anything," she said. "It was the best thing I ever did." He smiled. She straightened the tie one more time, though it didn't need it. Then they walked out together into the June light, and the music was playing, and Natalie was waiting at the end of a long aisle of white chairs and summer flowers, and Ryan walked toward her like a man who had finally, fully arrived at something he deserved. Margaret sat in the front row and watched her son get married, and she kept her hands folded in her lap, and she smiled the whole time. The kind of smile that lives so deep it doesn't need any help staying on your face. She had practiced for this moment for 31 years, and it was, just as she had always known it would be, absolutely perfect.